Ramses II, ruled 1279 to 1213 BCE, choice spellings. Ramesses, was once recognized to the Egyptians as Usermatra Setapener, which capacity keeper of harmony and balance, strong and right, elect of Ra and Apos. He is additionally acknowledged as Ozymandias and as Ramses the Great. He was once the 1/3 pharaoh of the 19th dynasty, 1292 to 1186 BCE, who claimed to have gained a decisive victory over the Hittites at the Battle of Kadesh and used this tournament to decorate his recognition as an amazing warrior. In reality, the hostilities was once greater of a draw than a decisive victory for both facet, however, resulted in the world's first regarded peace treaty in 1258 BCE. Although he is oftentimes related with the pharaoh from the biblical book of Exodus, there is no historic or archaeological proof for this whatsoever. Ramses lived to be 96 years old, had over 200 better halves and concubines, 96 sons and 60 daughters, most of whom he outlived. So lengthy was once his reign that all of his subjects, when he died, had been born understanding Ramses as pharaoh, and there was once substantial panic that the world would stop with the demise of their king. He had his title and accomplishments inscribed from one give up of Egypt to the different, and there is definitely no historic website online in Egypt which does now not make point out of Ramses the Great. Early life and campaigns. Ramses used to be the son of Seti I and Queen Tuya and accompanied his father on navy campaigns in Libya and Palestine at the age of 14. By the age of 22, Ramses was once main his personal campaigns in Nubia with his personal sons, Kamuset and Amun-Herwenimef, and used to be named co-ruler with Seti. With his father, Ramses set about tremendous restoration tasks and constructed a new palace at Avaris. The Egyptians had had an uneasy relationship with the kingdom of the Hittites, in current Asia Minor, who had grown in energy to dominate the region. Under the Hittite king Suppiluliuma I, r. 1344 to 1322 BCE, Egypt had misplaced many essential buying and selling facilities in Syria and Canaan. Seti I recaptured the most coveted center, Kadesh in Syria. However, it had been taken lower back by way of the Hittite King Muwatalli II, r. 1295 to 1272 BCE. After the demise of Seti I in 1290 BCE, Ramses assumed the throne and had as soon as started army campaigns to repair the borders of Egypt, make certain change routes, and take lower back from the Hittites what he felt rightfully belonged to him. In the 2d year of his reign, Ramses defeated the Sea peoples off the coast of the Nile Delta. According to his account, these had been humans regarded as the Shurdan who have been allies of the Hittites. Ramses later enticed for them via putting a small naval contingent at the mouth of the Nile to trap the Shurdan warships in. Once they had engaged the meager fleet, he launched his full assault from each sides, sinking their ships. Many of the Shurdan who survived the war had been then pressed into his army, some even serving as his elite bodyguard. The Sea people's beginning and ethnicity is unknown, though many theories have been suggested. However, Ramses describes them in his account as Hittite allies, and this is essential, as it underscores the relationship between the Egyptians and Hittites at this time. At some point, prior to the 12 months 1275 BCE, he started out building of his gorgeous metropolis Per-Ramses, House of Ramses, in the eastern delta place close to the older town of Avaris. Per-Ramses would be his capital, and continue to be a necessary city center at some stage in the Ramesside period, a pleasure palace, and army compound from which he would launch campaigns into neighboring regions. It was once now not solely an armory, army stable, and education floor, however, was once so fantastically built that it rivaled the class of the historical metropolis of Thebes. It is possible, as some students suggest, that Per-Ramses used to be honestly centered, and construction begun, by using Seti I due to the fact it was once already a functioning army center. With the aid of the time Ramses II launched his campaigns in 1275 BCE. Ramses marched his military into Canaan, which had been a Hittite vassal country on account that the reign of the Hittite king Suppiluliuma I. This marketing campaign used to be profitable, and Ramses backed domestic with plunder and Canaanite, and likely Hittite, royalty as prisoners. The historian Susan Wise Bauer comments, in late 1275 BCE, Ramses organized his navy to march on Kadesh and waited solely for the omens to be auspicious and phrased from his spies in Syria as to the enemy's electricity and position. In 1274 BCE, when all regarded in his favor, he led some 20,000 guys out of Ramses into battle. The navy divided into the 4 organizations named after the gods, Amun, Ra, Ptah, and Set. Ramses led the Amun division with the others following behind. The Battle of Kadesh they marched for 2 months earlier, than achieving a location, the place he felt assured, in arranging his military in struggle formation for assault on the metropolis, and waited with his Amun division, alongside with his sons, for the others to capture up. At this time, 2 Hittite spies had been captured who, underneath torture, gave up the area of the Hittite navy which they stated was once nowhere close to the city. Reassured, Ramses deserted his plans for an instant strike and gave orders for his division to encamp and wait for the relaxation of the navy to arrive. The Hittite army, however, was once truly much less than a mile away, and the 2 spies had been purposefully sent. As Ramses was once pitching camp, the Hittites roared out from in the back of the partitions of Kadesh and struck. The hostilities is described in Ramses' accounts, poem of Pentor and the Bulletin, in which he relates how the Amun division was once absolutely overrun via the Hittites, and the traces have been broken. The Hittite cavalry used to be reducing down the Egyptian infantry, and survivors have been scrambling for the security of their camp. Recognizing his situation, Ramses, known as upon his protector god, Amun, and fought back. According to historian Margaret Bunsen, Ramses delivered calm and reason to his small devices and started to slice his way via the enemy in order to attain his southern forces. With solely his family troops, with a few officers and followers, and with the rabble of the defeated gadgets standing by, he installed his chariot and observed the extent of the forces towards him. He then charged the Japanese wing of the assembled foe with such ferocity that they gave way, permitting the Egyptians to get away. The internet which Muwatalli had solid for them. 131. Ramses had solely simply became the tide of conflict when the Ptah division arrived, and he shortly ordered them to comply with him in the attack. He drove the Hittites towards the Orontes River, killing many of them whilst others drowned attempting to escape. He had no longer viewed the function as hasty. Cost may region him in, however, and was once now caught between the Hittites and the river. All Muwatalli II wanted to do to win at this factor was once to ship his reserve troops into struggle, and Ramses and his navy would have been destroyed. Yet, for some reason, the Hittite king did no longer do this. Ramses rallied his forces and drove the Hittites from the field. He then claimed a terrific victory for Egypt in that he had defeated his enemy. In conflict, however, the Battle of Kadesh almost resulted in his defeat and death. According to his very own reports, it was once solely owing to his very own non-public braveness and calm in hostilities, and the goodwill of the gods, that he was once in a position to flip the tide towards the Hittites. Ramesses immortalized his feats at Kadesh in the poem of Pentor and the Bulletin, in which he describes the conflict as a magnificent victory for Egypt. However, Muwatalli II additionally claimed victory in that he had no longer misplaced the metropolis to the Egyptians. The Battle of Kadesh led to the first peace treaty ever signed in the world between Ramses II of Egypt and Muwatalli II's successor, Hattusili III, d. 1237 BCE, of the Hittite Empire. After the Battle of Kadesh, Ramses committed himself to enhancing Egypt's infrastructure, strengthening its borders, and commissioning massive constructing initiatives commemorating his victory of 1274 and his different accomplishments. Queen Nefertari and later life. The full-size tomb complicated acknowledged as the Ramesseum at Thebes, the temples at Abu Simbel, the corridor at Karnak, the complicated at Abydos, and actually heaps of different buildings, monuments, temples have been all built by means of Ramses. Many historians think about his reign the pinnacle of Egyptian artwork and tradition, and the well-known tomb of Nefertari with its wall artwork is noted as clear proof of the fact of this claim. Nefertari used to be Ramses' first spouse and his favorite queen. Many depictions of Nefertari show up on temple partitions and in statuary all through his reign. Even although she appears to have died pretty early in their marriage, perhaps in infant birth, and her tomb, even though located looted, was once a work of artwork in development and decoration. After Nefertari, Ramses multiplied his secondary spouse Isetnefer to the role of queen and, after her death, his daughters grew to be his consorts. Even so, the reminiscence of Nefertari appears to have constantly been shut in his idea and that Ramses had her likeness engraved on partitions and statuary. Lengthy after he had taken different wives, he continually dealt with the youth of these other halves with equal regard and respect. Nefertari was once the mom of his sons Ramesses and Amun-Herwenamef and Isetnefer, the mom of Kamuset, and but all three had been dealt with the same Ramses as Pharaoh of Exodus. Although Ramses has been popularly related with the Pharaoh of the biblical book of Exodus, there is certainly no proof to assist this claim. The affiliation of the title Ramses with the unnamed Pharaoh of Egypt in the Bible grew to be pretty frequent after the success of Cecil B. DeMille's movie The Ten Commandments in 1956. Film variations of the biblical story since, which includes the famous animated movie Prince of Egypt, 1998, and the extra latest Exodus, Gods and Kings, 2014, each observed the lead of DeMille's movie. However, there is no historic help for this association. Exodus 1:11 and 12:37 as properly as Numbers 33:3 and 33:5 all point out per Ramses as one of the cities the Israelite slaves labored on and additionally the town they departed Egypt from. There is no proof of a mass exodus from the town, nor from any different town in the records of Egypt, and none to help the declare that per Ramses used to be constructed with the aid of slave labor. Extensive archaeological excavations at Giza and some place else all through Egypt have unearthed adequate proof that the constructing tasks accomplished beneath the reign of Ramses II, and each different king of Egypt, used knowledgeable and unskilled Egyptian workers who had been both paid for their time or who volunteered as section of their civic duty. The customized of Egyptian residents volunteering their time to work on the king's constructing tasks is nicely documented, and it used to be even notion that, in the afterlife, souls would be referred to as upon to work for Osiris, Lord of the Dead, on the constructing tasks he would want. The exercise of setting Shapti dolls in the tombs and graves of the lifeless was once exactly for this purpose, so the dolls would take the vicinity of the deceased in work projects. Further, Ramses was once famous for recording histories of his accomplishments and for embellishing the data when they did no longer pretty match records as he wished it preserved. It appears fairly not likely that such a king would overlook to report, with or besides a favorable slant, the plagues which allegedly fell upon Egypt or the flight of the Hebrew slaves. One what now not count number totally on the inscriptions Ramses himself ordered. However, the Egyptians, from the time they mastered writing circa 3200 BCE, stored very great information, and none of them even trace at a massive populace of Hebrew slaves in Egypt a great deal, much less their exodus. Further, the literary works of the Egyptians from the Middle Kingdom through the late period furnish severe motifs, themes, and real activities which have been made use of by way of the later scribes who wrote the biblical narratives. The affiliation of Ramses with the cruel, cussed Pharaoh of Exodus is unlucky as it obscures the persona of a man who was once a fantastic and noble ruler. Legacy. The reign of Ramses II has emerged as extremely controversial over the ultimate century, with some students claiming he used to be greater of a showman and a propagandist than a nice king, and others arguing the opposite. The information of his reign, then again, each the written and the bodily proof of the temples and monuments, argue for a very steady and affluent reign. He used to be one of the few rulers to stay and rule lengthy ample to take phase in 2 Heb said galas which had been held each 30 years to rejuvenate the pharaoh. He secured the country's borders, elevated its wealth, and widened its scope of exchange, and, if he boasted of his accomplishments in his inscriptions and monuments, it is due to the fact he had excellent motive to be proud. Ramses the Great's mummy suggests that he stood over 6 foot in peak with a strong, jutting jaw, skinny nostril and thick lips. He suffered from dental problems, extreme arthritis, and hardening of the arteries and, most likely, died from historic age or coronary heart failure. He was once regarded to later Egyptians as the great ancestor, and many pharaohs would do him the honor of taking his title as their own. Some of them, such as Ramses III, are viewed higher rulers than he was. None of them, however, would surpass the grand achievements and glory of Ramses the Great in the minds and hearts of the historical